Less noise from the buses. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome. If you can't hear me, raise your hand. I'll try and broadcast. I used to give tours at the state capitol, so I am used to trying to, keep fourth graders entertained. My name is Paul Walter. I'm the executive director of the Sauk County Historical Society. Welcome to Sauk County. You're in the town of Greenfield at the world-famous Man Mound. Our society started in 1905. We're one of the fourth oldest local historical society in the state of Wisconsin. We're number 4 out of about 450 today. So we're pretty proud of our longevity and our affiliation and relationship with the Wisconsin Historical Society. One of the first things we did in 1907 was raise money along with the Wisconsin Archaeological Society and the Wisconsin Federated Women's Clubs to raise all of about $260 to purchase this piece of property to preserve the Man Mound. As far as we know, it's the first property ever purchased in Wisconsin specifically to preserve a mound. And of course, it's the only man-shaped effigy mound left on the planet, and Amy will talk a lot more about its history. So we preserved it in 1907, and we set up a park here in 1908, and it had to be cleaned off. There were small trees and brush on it. Fortunately, in 1859, the first surveyor in Sauk County was also our first historian, a man named William Canfield, surveyed the mound in August of 1859 and drew it. You'll see his picture drawing of it on the interpretive panels. And fortunately for that, we know the full extent of the Man Mound, because if you've probably seen, the road goes right through the legs. The feet were on the other side. And although they have been indicated over there by mowed grass, that's private property, we ask that you not get out on the road because it's extremely dangerous, and that is private property over there. But unfortunately, it was partially, yeah, exactly, partially destroyed. But even with that, it was still worthy of being a National Historic Landmark. So as things went along, we've owned it now for well over 100 years. And in 2008, with the 100th anniversary of the park looming, we decided to have a big centennial celebration. And we also looked at the National Register nomination. It had been nominated in the 70s. It was all of about 4 pages. So that had to be updated, and I'm sure Amy was involved heavily with that. And that then led to, well, let's go for National Historic Landmark status, and Amy will talk about that. But a funny thing happened about 20-some years ago. The county, who has managed this as a park probably for 70 years, did a survey of their property, and they discovered they didn't own this piece of property. We did. We forgot that. They forgot that. For decades, it just was a county park, and they mowed it and took care of it. So we spiffied all that up with an actual 20-year lease and a collaborative agreement just to get things official. The county still maintains this for us. It's a great partnership. And then through efforts with the Ho-Chunk Nation, we've been able to implement parts of the master plan here, which included much better interpretation, taking down trees that were in danger of falling on the mound, other things. And I'd like to bring Matt Steve up. He's the Sauk County Parks Director and the one that takes care of this one-of-a-kind piece of property for us. And he can tell you a little bit about the partnership we have with us and with the Ho-Chunk Nation.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. Working with the Ho-Chunk Nation, working with Paul and the Historical Society has been fun. It's been educational. But one thing I want to really drive home is I've been working and managing this property for close to 3 decades. And every time I step foot in this property, I respect this property. And it's an honor for me to be the person charged with managing this property. It's more complicated than one would think. The mound is a man-made structure. Your first thoughts would be, okay, let's plant prairies or plant prairie plants. But if we want to preserve the mound as it sits, it's a complicated process. And because you have people that would like to plant prairie plants, you might want to manage it as a turf, you have to kind of balance that and find out what is the best option for this specific site. Every site is different. But the best thing we did was work with both the Ho-Chunk Nation, with the Sauk County Historical Society, and come up with a master plan. So we all agreed on what is the right thing to do to this property, to work with this property as it matures. And it's been a lot of fun, because it's like I said, it was a complicated process, but I've enjoyed my the whole process, and here we are. It's really cool to see everybody. This is awesome.
Yeah. All right. We'll bring up Amy next, who you met before, but Amy was in charge of not only writing the National Historic Landmark nomination, but going to scary Washington, D.C. and defending it in front of a panel, and she can tell about that.
Okay, how's my volume? Good? No louder? All right, we're good. All right, right here. Got it. All right.
Cool, thanks.
All right, so I've been involved with the man out here for a lot of years. I won't betray my age by saying how many, but it's been a while. So when the National Register of Historic Places form needed to be redone, they asked me to do it, and there was a boundary expansion involved with that, because they wanted to make sure that the boundary of the site reflected the actual mound, because it used to stop at the road. So the boundary was taken across the road where the feet used to be. So even though the physical traces of the feet are gone, you know, spiritually and morally, they're still there. We need to protect that as part of the site. That, as Bill said, caught the attention of other people, and they said, what about National Historic Landmark? Okay. I'd never written a landmark nomination before. It's a brand new thing. Okay. Like, all right, let's take this on. Okay. The first thing we had to do is put it in context, and the context is important. So this is the last human or human spirit-shaped effigy mound on the planet, it was said. There were only a handful others known on Earth. Okay. One in the northwestern part of the county, the Laval Man Mound. Okay. There's another one in downtown Baraboo. Both of those have been destroyed. Okay. There are a few more, the next county, kind of southwest of here, destroyed, plowed away in farms, or just hauled away. Okay. So this is the last survivor. Okay. And he's got a road right through his feet, where William Canfield surveys the road in, and because the mound was straddling the grid that Europeans wanted to put on the land, away the feet and the legs went. You know, they couldn't change the grid, they had to go through it. So, you know, so how do we capture that? You know, we put in that context. He's the last survivor, he's been damaged. It's important. Okay. As a work of art, as a sculpture, this is an amazing piece of artwork, if nothing else. He's got detail, he's got personality. You can say he's walking to the west. He's, you know, kind of striding in mid-stride, captured that way. Feet pointing towards the setting sun. We got all that together. We talked to the tribes, Ho-Chunk, Menominee. The others were asked, do you support this? Is there anything you'd like to say? And the letters of support came in. Like, we want this nominated. We want this to be a National Historic Landmark. We need this to be up there and visible. Okay. And so off went to D.C. Okay. Now, we were behind another archaeological site, and I'm not going to embarrass anybody by saying which one it was. Okay. But it was a big site. It's the kind you read about in textbooks when you're becoming an archaeologist. And I'm like, oh man, here's this huge site that I have heard about all my career. And I've got this amazing mound, but he's got no feet. Am I going to be able to get this through? And the site ahead of me goes up. And one of the first things they say is, we need to hand you these letters. This is the list of tribes we're going to consult with. And well, wait a minute. Going to? Shouldn't y'all have done that already? And I could see the panel just kind of, And it went downhill from there for them. And I'm nervous. I get up and I start the slide presentation. I say, if you look at your packets, you're going to see the letters of support from our tribal partners and went through the thing, and everyone was, yeah, this sounds great. They said, we have one question. What about those feet? And I said, I will tell you something. Every time I am here, and I am with a citizen of Wisconsin who is seeing this for the very first time, they all say exactly the same thing. They look at the road and they say, how did they let that happen? And I said, we want this mound to be an ambassador. We want him to educate the public, not just about effigy mounds and about tribal heritage, but about what happens if it's not respected. And I said, this mound does that. And they nodded and they said, okay, he's a landmark. And that was that. And I went, whew. And I went to a museum and had some ice cream. Yeah. But then that set a larger conversation in place. Okay. How should it be interpreted? How should it be managed? How should it be mowed? The Sacred Sites Committee was convened. You know, I've had meetings out here and down the street with Bill Quackenbush and others. And I think in the end, we got something pretty good put together out here. The man's looking good. He's lost a little of his shade, but he's looking good. He's got his ferns here, and his horns are his headdress, which I'm always happy to see. And people are coming to visit, and they're coming to learn. And I'm starting to get emails now that say, hey, I noticed something out at the man mound. Is that okay? People reporting, I saw where somebody like drove a little off the parking lot. Can you check that out? In other words, people are starting to put themselves in the caretaker position as they come here, and that's exactly what I'm looking for and what I think we're all looking for at this site. So, all right. With that, Bill, where'd he go? I lost him. He's around. Yeah, there he is.
All right.
I'd love to put the county historical societies, but
All right, so I'm gonna let my belly button do the talking here. Oh.
I'm short, Bill.
All right. So, yeah. Well, first of all, I want to thank Paul and Matt and Amy beforehand to come out here and meet. Pretty much on a moment's notice, we were talking about the different properties we wanted to focus on as far as a preservation conference goes, and some of the topics I wanted to cover, obviously, would have been what I really enjoyed seeing through the last decade or so of going to NATHPO, well, since 2005, actually. It's been quite a few years. And at those site visits, oftentimes I always question to myself, why are we standing there? What was the purpose of us being brought to them by that tribe that was showing those properties off? And I was thinking to myself, I could taking you to properties of our own, you know, on tribal trust lands of what I do, this and that. But, you know, the theme, you know, regarding NATHPO keeps coming back to that partnershiping and that collaboration, right? And how can we go above and beyond what we can jurisdictionally cover as a TIPO and maybe work and create a network with other, you know, people of like minds out there? And when one of the assumptions and duties TIPOs have, for example, are, you know, to support in the process and review, you know, places that are being considered to be, you know, eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. But this one here had reached that. And though I think Paul did state, what was it, four pages? Four pages, and with not much, if anything at all, mentioned in there about the cultural connection of this site to the indigenous groups of people. Right? And with that said, even when we went to talking about sitting in houses here, sitting at the townships in the county, right? And meeting on what to place down in support of a letter, for example, of support. We had to be really careful of how to word a request for the nomination to be considered by somebody who takes it behind a closed door over there in Washington or where it is over there, and they make that decision, right? Because if you add too much indigenous knowledge or indigenous terminology that isn't, you know, within the parameters of archaeology, it causes a question for that for some reason. It shouldn't be that way, right? It's our site through and through. It should be on the National Register of and a landmark, right? A representation, as Amy put it there, an ambassador is the term that I saw through and through the process there. It becomes an ambassador to protect and preserve and perpetuate the last of its kind. Now, there used to be, I think, no less than 4 different man forms or man shapes of earthworks in our ancestral footprint. We purchased a property down in Muscadet. Our tribe bought a whole full square mile of land down there that includes an island out there, McCarthy Island, what we affectionately call the Bison Ranch. And on that Bison Ranch, there are no less than 3 different mound groups on there, effigy mound groups. One of them had already destroyed earthworks on there that included one of the last of these walkers, these earth walkers. And when we talk about these mounds on here, all it is just on that rope I showed you, that period of time where you saw Tim, Jesus, Cowan standing there, those mounds being formed, right? That was just a short snapshot in a little part of our ancestral histories here. We went from before earthworks, and now we're living after the earthworks were made, right? We don't make earthworks anymore, so they're not going to magically become more earthworks out there. Maybe in the future, our generations and time says may have to go back and do that again, but we don't do that to this day. So you got to protect and preserve what we have left on here. The representations of our past, they represent us today in the present, and hopefully they can represent us in the future. Our indigenous ways of life is integrated into that process there too. And now, one thing that should be mentioned, I can't come on this property and do anything unless I work alongside the county, right? Or the state on here, because if you turn over a blade of dirt on here, there's a permit process in place to disturb soils within so many feet of a national registered site, right? Or within, at least for this account here, a burial site. This is, in effect, is called a burial marker back here. One thing that Ricky isn't here right now, is he here? No. Didn't say that Wisconsin Burial Law 157.70, that's one of our guiding documents we use a lot in Wisconsin here to protect and preserve these as grave markers out there. And through and through, and Amy is the foreknown knowledge person that wrote a book about mound system, right? It included Milwaukee, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and parts of Iowa. Well, that said, from her data that they had compiled, what is the number? Around 80% of these mounds had burials either in them and or around a close proximity of them. And so that basically is something we used in 157 to make that determination that these are grave markers. No different than if you went to Arlington Cemetery, you see the stone of the unknown soldier there, right? That is a grave marker. You don't know who the person is on the ground, but I'll tell you what, if you went there to desecrate that at all, there'd be hell to pay, right? There'd be issues right there. And that should be no different with our most sacred sites. Our most valid warriors and chiefs and those people that are buried, these dignitaries around these burial markers on here, they should be regarded no less than those warriors out there in Washington. And that's the way we see it. But it's hard to get that across to people. And to put that into that document for it to be accepted as a landmark, there's a lot of tongue-in-cheek that goes into that process, but it took place out there. Now, could it be better yet? It can definitely be better yet. And it doesn't go without expense to take care of this property. I know the county, he's been doing it for 3 decades or more over here, but it's at their expense on here. And I know it's a little county park when it should be a national registered site, right? And if not, it should be something that's no different than Effigy Mound's National Monument over there, National Park Service property right here. Not many acres on here, and I think they want to include that footprint of that farm over there, because here's why, and that ridge up there, because there's why. Because you know what that preacher right there is doing? You know what part of that is in your ancestral, stories and history and culture right there? All of us indigenous folks have this story right there, what that shows right there. And you have to learn what that is then, because we know what it is. And to sit there and try to tongue-in-cheek get enough wording in there to protect it, but not disclose those culturally sensitive things that they always seem to want, right? Like I said, when we were talking to GSA down there, they just wanted more. I had an archaeologist from Dallas, Texas, take me behind closed door down there at Badger Ammo, and he said, if you could just tell me, just between you and I, why it's so important for you to have Badger Ammo. It's just between you and I. And you think it would have stayed just between you and I over there? And that's what they'll do to you. They'll take you and they'll try to pull every drop of blood out of you because once they gain all your knowledge and all your other stuff like that, you're worthless to them. You're worthless to them. So you have to be those cultural experts that you take those assumptions and duties and become, right? As TIPOs. You assume that from the states because you should have a better cultural awareness of your people. And if you don't, you've instilled in that program that you created for TIPO ways to get it. You got a cultural committee. I got a traditional courts. You got tribal elders. You have something they don't have, and it's a value to them. You don't get paid to do that, but you still have that value there. And that's why it's so important to protect those, create those databases, make them comprehensive for your own use, And we used to share once in a while with the State Historical Society on an archaeological sites inventory, some sites here and there. And now I'm thinking in hindsight, I should have shared every single one of them. Except anybody with an amount of money can go over there. You got to be a licensed archaeologist or whatever, but you can pay and gain access to that site. So should I or should I have not have? In hindsight, I want to retire in less than 4 years. I keep telling that I want to retire tomorrow. I says, right? But my database is mediocre, right? My land management practices are mediocre because we're spread too thin, right? And why I say that is that TIPOs are just a TIPO and maybe assistant. Or I was gifted a small staff over there. I'm one of the few tribes that have more than just a TIPO sitting at that table at the end of the day. As we're standing here, I can guarantee you your desk, the mail is piling up, right? There's nobody doing your job while you're away. And I know that for a fact there because I've been to many NATHPO conferences, right? And so we have to figure out better ways of doing that. So if you create those networking processes and collaborations, that's the key to that there too. But now why this is so significant. She mentions that headdress, those ferns right there. Ferns obviously is fen, right? Or wetlands come out here. The spring that comes off of this, one NOLA here, is very important to us. You don't see it no more, but there's wetness that comes out of this hill. Certain times of years, you would have bored down in the ground in here and got your water, for your meals over here. That would have been where you got it, right? And the Starman, right? Everybody knows the Starman in their stories. You should have that Starman there. He's the only effigy mounds we have that face pretty much due north and south, right over here. And those sisters, them 7 sisters that come through at certain times of years are resting on those hills. And we come here in November and into December when it's a clear skies over here, and that just realigns just right. And you have those dark shadows of old that you had of those mounds casting those shadows across here with that new moon on here. It just makes your hair stand on end because those 7 sisters begin marching across this range right out here. And this is the one trying to get to them, the Starman, right? And our warriors, our little dippers, our bears right there, they're protecting those women who are locked in time. And if you go and show that shadow and you look at the sky sitting here in the middle of winter and that snow on here, it's such a beautiful story to watch. And it happens every single year, year in, year out. Now, you got to remember when he was put here, there's always a single tree in this area. We had oak savanna type settings. You always hear that environmental. Oh, is that oak savanna type settings? Big bulls, oaks over there, open prairies on here. And this trail, that's the Baraboo Range that go through here, but there's this trail that you come alongside on here. Your village is old with sat on here, waiting for this to unfold. We'd come up here in the evenings with our women and our children and tell these stories that are untold on here. And when they first, in 19-something here, had that dedication, I can guarantee you those tribal members that were sitting here, they had came here and placed tobacco down. And they had wished for good tidings and hoped that these guys can take care of this place over here. Because you see in some of those historic photos, in the background, there was Native Americans, our ancestors, sitting here watching what they're going to do with our site here. So whether that would have been destroyed or not, who knows, right? Before that, who knows? Whether it would have been gone, it really wouldn't matter really to us. It does now, because we had a hard time telling those stories still. But back then, they were just in hopes that it would be protected. Back then, we were like living from hand to mouth. Like in 1906, we were like 20 years fresh back from our last removal from South Dakota. We were still trying to figure out how to live on an allotment land of 40 acres, stuck in an area that nobody else wanted. They took all of the land around here for their use over there and gave us back those remnants of little 40 acres all over our areas here that had no soil, was either on an incline that was too steep to farm on, or it was too wet. And that's what they said, you need to become productive Wisconsinites. And that's what they gave us. So we had a hard time struggling through here, but we're still here. So we can't look back over spilt milk, right? So we got to carry on and carry on. So now why this is important to us is because this guy right here. his heart and soul is in this property. No different than if I had had my children come in here taking care of this for the last 30 years. Their heart and soul would have been in here. It becomes theirs. Now there's that process, right? Should we mow it? Should we not mow it? How do you do it? And I think in the bottom line, when he goes home at night, his staff goes home at the end of that year and they see if it's gotten worse or better, they have to make that adjustment and go. Now, I know Sauk County, and this grass grows like a weed down here. And maybe it is a weed, I don't know, down here. And it's a bear to deal with there too. But if you let that go and become those big prairie grasses on here, it'll become a hideous sight from that road, right? It's just something about that. I know to some prairie enthusiasts it looks pretty good, but just as we were standing there at that split-tailed bird mound effigy there at Devil's Lake, that little rodent came out. He was supper for me, boys. I was really licking my lips, but then Amy's, he's chasing her back in the woods, right? But anyway, so they have to have a place of home, and that's where they sought refuge in there. Once you let that woody material come back on their high grasses, they can hide in there. And no falcons or nothing around here. Those raptors, birds of prey, can't get to them, and that's where they like to hide. So there's a happy medium out there. And so there's a juggling act. And we're going to go to a site on Thursday if you have the opportunity to stick around. And we go to a site we take care of. It's called Kingsley Bend. No different than this site. It's earthworks on there. The DOT plays a prominent role in that discussion. So hold on to your socks. You get to hear her talk for 20 minutes over there. You'll know what I'm talking about after that one. So we'll see how that goes there too. But that'll be a really enjoyable time there. And that said, is there anything else you would like to mention?
I just want to see how many tribes are represented.
Yes. Paul has a really good question because I mentioned that 1903, those natives standing in the background. When we had our centennial over here, we had our drum group, and Willie Cleveland was president at the time, or was it John? I can't remember which one it was. Both of them were here. And we had that drum group over here. When they had their new dedication, the landmark, we had tribal representation here. They've asked us to be included on their their educational outreach over here, and we did that too. In fact, I even think there's a QR code of some old grumpy elders talking on the QR code over there too. So I won't say who that is. So that said, Paul asked a question.
So I think this is very historic today. Of course, I'm the director of the Historical Society, but I don't think we've ever had or ever will have this many tribes here at Man Mound before or ever again, unless you have your conference here again. So if you could one person from each tribe, just one, raise your hand so I can count how many tribes are represented here today. That would be really cool. So talk amongst yourselves, just one of you from each different 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 33, 34, 35. That's really incredible.
About 35.
So,
okay.
So,
Well, one
appreciate
better.
that.
We can get them all behind the head. I'll take a picture.
And then let's get
Get
a group.
everybody here behind the head here up there.
Just don't step on the ferns. That's the mound. But if you want to come up here, let's get a once in a lifetime picture here at the Man Mound. Stay there. Stay there. We're coming to you. We're coming to you.